Alright, in your Module 0 folder, go ahead and create a new folder for your dictionaries work, and then cd into it, and then create a new file called signcounting.py. Do you remember in the last section there was a programming challenge where you were required to count all the H's in a bunch of messages for a sign printing shop? Well, your boss was so impressed with your work that she has asked you to count all of the letters. So let's go ahead and write a program that does that together. As mentioned before, we want to start getting into a habit of writing the key logic inside functions. So go ahead and create a new function with me called count_nums, and it's going to intake one parameter, which is the message whose letters we want to count. However, we're not going to write anything in the function just yet, so go ahead and type pass, which is a keyword that allows you to just do nothing. Now down below, go ahead and take an input. Doesn't really matter what the variable or prompt say. I'm going to call mine message and say input a message, and then for now I'm just going to print out this message back to the user. So go ahead and write this change and then execute your code. You can type whatever message you want to, and then it'll just print it back out to you. Cool. So now what we need to do is we need to essentially iterate through every single letter, and then this time, instead of counting individual letters, we need to count all of them. And this is going to happen inside our function. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to change this print statement to call countNums, and then I'm going to pass message in. And now we can start writing our function. So another habit I want you to get into doing is writing doc comments. And so doc comments are a very special type of comment that is used to create documentation for your code. We're not going to be doing that for any of these example problems just yet, but I want you to get into the habit of doing it. Doc comments use the triple-double quotes as the opener and closer, and all it is a simple, short explanation of what this function does. The usefulness of this will be shown in the next section when we actually generate documentation for our game code. Anyways, moving on, get rid of the pass placeholder statement here and then go ahead and iterate through every letter in your message. Now, how do we count all the letters that are in the message? Well, if we were doing it the way we were doing before, you can have little a as 0, little b as 0, little c as 0, etc. A different variable name for every single letter. However, this is not practical and is quite frankly terrible because guess what? You got all your lowercase letters, you got all your uppercase letters, you got digits, you got special characters, etc. It's not practical to do that. So what do? We use a dictionary. In our dictionary, we can use the actual letter itself as the key, and then the value associated with that key is going to be the number of times it has shown up. And now, for every single letter inside our message, if letter encounter, remember, this is an easy check to see if the key or the letter already exists in our dictionary, and if it does, then we're going to want to fetch the current count and then basically increment it by 1. You could, if you wanted to, make a new variable and then set it equal to counter of letter and then make changes to that variable. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set counter of letter equal to counter of letter, what it currently is now, plus 1. This is just like what you do with a normal integer variable. Okay, and so this is the scenario for if we have encountered this letter before, then the key is going to exist in the dictionary. Otherwise, it'll be the first time we have encountered this letter. I'm just going to say counter of letter is equal to 1. The very first time we encounter this letter, just set the value to 1, and then every subsequent time we'll increment it. And that's basically the bulk of our logic right there. This is the key functionality that counts all the letters. And so now all we need to do is just print it back out to the user. So down below here outside of our for loop, we're going to create another for loop, and then we're going to iterate through each of the items inside the dictionary. You can do this whichever way you want to. I'm going to show you the fully fleshed out way, which is for key, comma, value in counter.items. This will return both the key and the value in separate variables, and then I'm going to print out both. And that's it. Go ahead and write your changes and then execute the code. I'm going to... Okay, this is the longest sentence I have ever typed in my life because I want to test how this program works. Whew, okay, there you go. And then I hit enter and then you get all this stuff. But if you scroll up, you'll see here that there's an empty key with 20. Those are the spaces. Since we're a sign manufacturing shop, we don't really need to manufacture or print a space. This isn't useful information for us. So we can go ahead and go back into our program and discard it. And now, a small thinking exercise for you. Come up with 2 different ways that you could remove the space. Feel free to pause the video and think it through for just a minute, and then when you're ready, hit play to continue. Okay, there were multiple ways you could have done this. Our programs right now are still really simple and small, and so really, you're not going to see huge performance differences between any of these suggestions. It doesn't matter right now. The first way you could have done this is to just go ahead and count the spaces anyway, but then before printing out the values, just deleting the space key, and that gets rid of that data point that we don't need. Another way you could have done this is by adding another condition check inside our conditional statement here. We can check if the letter is equal to a space, then we don't collect any data points or anything. Finally, the last way you could have done this is to use a built-in string function or an external library if you wanted to just strip the spaces from the string. That way, the data was never even there to ignore. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new variable called newMessage, and I'm going to set it equal to message.replace, and then I'm going to replace a space with an empty string, which effectively just removes the space. And so now I'm going to iterate through the new message instead of the original message, and then my output, I don't have to massage or change data at all. I can just print it out as is. So if I write my changes, execute my code, I type in a long message, yada yada yada, and then you can see here in the output there are no spaces. And so this is using a dictionary to count all the letters that you need to manufacture in a message for your boss.